Okay, as it says here, and I hope everybody can see the screen that I'm sharing. My name is George Seaman, and I am the director at Northwest Kansas Library System. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. And I want to share with you our agenda for tonight. We'll have an introduction, and then after that, we're going to move into talking about the board. And then with that, the big three, as I like to call it, plan, budget, and policy. After that, we're going to talk about the library director or librarian position and the relationship the board has with that position. And then we'll conclude and wrap up with questions. So we should have a pretty smooth evening tonight. And like I said, if you have questions at any time, please don't hesitate to unmute and ask or type it in the chat, and I'll get to that question. So I would like to start off by saying thank you to all of you for being here tonight and taking time away from, I know, very busy schedules to be here. And thank you as well for serving on the library board. I know sometimes it can seem like a thankless job, and so I want to make sure that I am thanking you for doing that. And since you're here and you could be pretty much anywhere else tonight, I would assume that you have some sort of a love for the public library. In some way it's important to you, or I'm sure you wouldn't serve on the board, or you feel it's important to your community. And so right now I want to open up to all of you a question. So why are you here? Or why do you serve on the library board? And so I'd like you to just take a couple seconds here and think about it. And then I'd like some of you to please take a minute, unmute, and share with me why you're here tonight, or why do you serve on the library board?
George, this is Kathy.
Okay.
Our little tiny town has a little tiny library of all volunteer people. If we didn't participate, if we didn't take care of it, we would not have a library at all. So if we're not going to do it, who's going to?
Well, I'm glad you're there to do it.
Well, thank you. And I have two new people that are sitting in tonight for the very first time. So yay!
All right, good, good, good. Okay, anybody else? Come on, don't be shy.
All right, I'll throw a little information at you. I'm a retired educator.
Okay.
And I just feel that the libraries are absolutely valuable to get information to folks, to give them an opportunity to explore and expand their world. And especially when you get further and further out into the less populated areas, there's less good quality information available to folks other than internet and television. And so I am retired, knew Irene, and so she asked me to be a part, and so I decided to do that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Excellent words there. Much appreciated.
Hi, George. This is Harold.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of ditto what Kathy had to say about if we don't do it, nobody else will, because that's what happens in small towns, you know. Yeah. But also, also agree with what Gary had to say. You know, not only are our libraries a kind of a last place where we can go for reference, but it's also a last place where we can go for a gathering. And so that's one of the reasons that we're, you know, that I think our library is so important.
Excellent.
Hey, George.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I had laptops set up for this and my trustee's sitting down and you kicked me all off. I can't get in. So Bethany's going to sit down here in my place and use my computer, and I'll be here too. So here you go, Beth.
Okay, perfect.
Here you go, sweetie. Okay. Hi.
Hello.
Bethany.
All right. So Bethany, we're looking at these two questions that we have on the screen here. And we're kind of going through thinking, why are we here? And or why do we serve on the library board? And we've had some good answers so far, and I'm just curious to hear from a couple other folks, see what they have to say.
Hi,
This is-
George.
Go ahead.
This is Crystal from Hoxie. I was asked to serve on the library board. I have 4 children, ages 6 and under. So
Oh, wow.
that's what we do. We go to story time and we go and play and we check out books, and we're not involved in the school system yet. And so the library is kind of an outlet for us to get plugged in with activities around our community. So
Excellent, excellent. Wow, that's a crazy family right there.
yeah, it keeps me going.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Let's see. I
Lord,
think,
this is Joan, and
okay.
I'm here because I want to keep learning, and I wanted to support your Zoom seminars. I hope to listen again tomorrow night. I think every time we attend something like this, we're going to learn something. And I serve on the library board because we've kind of become a gathering place in town, and we want to make our library the best that it can be.
Excellent, excellent.
This is Emily from Sharon Springs, and I am a former school librarian. I have been a school librarian in 3 different libraries, and when I was asked to be on the board, it was just a perfect fit. Actually, it was on my bucket list.
Excellent. That is awesome. It's on mine too, when eventually when I retire, so. Right. By the way, I don't do this for you guys. I do this to make myself feel better here because, you know, I got to hear all these positive things coming from all of you, and it does my heart good. So appreciate it. And I know all of you have good reasons for serving. Okay, well, let's move on with our agenda now. Thank you for sharing. I truly do appreciate it. So tonight I'm going to give a broad overview of the board, and then of the librarian position, and then that relationship. And then I hope to tomorrow get a little deeper into some other topics, and then in other seminars down the road to really cover a lot of what the library board is and how trustees function in that board. And so tonight is just basically the first step in that. So we'll start off by telling you some boring facts. So be prepared. Some of this is going to get a little dry. I understand that. But I do want to convey some of this because I believe it's important. So in the state of Kansas, there are 5 different types of public libraries that are organized into 5 different types of library boards. Each one has specific statutes that directs the makeup and function of the boards. For our purposes this evening, we will focus on only one type that is in the region, which is the city library, or the library board of the city. We don't have any county that participate, or any township or anything like that. So our focus will be solely on cities. KSA 12-1222 states that the library board of the city library consists of 7 members appointed by the mayor with the approval of the city council or commission. The city mayor acts as a voting ex officio member of the board. That means that the mayor, whether he attends or not, is counted towards quorum. So city library boards need 5 members to make quorum, since there are, in essence, 8 members total. City board members, trustees, serve a 4-year term and are eligible for 2 terms. Let me advance my slides here too. There we go. Terms are staggered amongst the board members, so that not all members of the board are term limited at the same time. If for some reason a member or trustee resigns, the person that replaces them would finish out their term and would still be eligible to serve 2 additional terms. It is also expected that members and trustees really, you can go by both, either one. I've heard some people call themselves members and some trustees, but we like the word trustees, that have served their term, serve until a replacement is selected. So you're not even off the hook once you're term limited. We still have you until we find somebody to replace you. So keep that in mind, all of you. And we also like those partial terms, because then we can get you for 8 years plus whatever was remaining on that other term. So man, see our tools that we have in our basket here to keep you guys. KSA 12-1224 states that the library board will elect officers annually. This would include a chair, a secretary, and a treasurer, as well as any other officers that might be necessary. The chair of the library board presides at meetings and draws up the agenda with assistance from the library director, librarian, and with the secretary signs all checks and contracts. Presiding at the library board meeting is one of the most challenging and important duties of the chair. And Joan, I know you've been in that seat before, and you might still be in it, but isn't that one of the most challenging jobs that you can have on the board?
Well, I guess I don't look at it as a challenge. I have a good board. They come to the meetings, they help make decisions, they help work on projects. So I think it's enjoyable.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Excellent. And see, that's why we're training everybody, so that we can make all chairs have that kind of an experience, right? It is important to make sure that discussion is guided and participants stay on topic. Me, I like to go down rabbit holes. I'm sure all of you have that same tendency in different ways. And that all agenda items are addressed at the meeting. And here are some boards that we've kind of in the library profession stamped here. We have the wandering board, where they go down rabbit holes and go behind trees and avoid topics to discuss. We have the hurried board that come in and try and take an hour's worth of business and get it done in 5 minutes. We have the rubber stamp board. I like this one, the ones that come in and just do whatever the director says or the chair says. Then we have the micromanaging board, the ones that like to nitpick everything that's going on in the library, and the antagonistic board, or even the absentee board. So let's make sure we're not one of those and not helping to grow that kind of behavior in our boards. So board behavior really starts with the chair. Secretary records the proceedings of the board meetings and presents the minutes from the previous meeting for approval, signs the minutes after they're approved, and places them with the other minutes of the board. And these should be stored in the library, hopefully. As stated earlier, the secretary with the chair signs the checks and contracts. Okay, so that's a big thing that I've seen over the years at the system. We have a secretary who, after they're term limited, for some reason they don't get the minute book back, and then it becomes a huge struggle for the library board to get the minute book back, and then we don't know what to do. And so that's why I definitely recommend that the minute books are stored at the library, so that we don't have that issue in the future. Not that I'm saying all secretaries are horrible or anything like that, but it has happened. The treasurer of the board is to receive all tax funds from the municipality and all gifts or endowments given to the library. KSA 12-1226 requires that a treasurer be bonded. Okay. I think, let's see, most of you, how many of you have a treasurer that actually does the book work? I'm hearing laughing.
George, it's Harry.
Yeah.
Yeah, our treasury actually does the book work along with myself, actually.
Okay, so you tag team it.
We do it together.
Excellent. Good to hear. Anybody else? I'm just kind of curious more than anything.
Our treasurer does the book work.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what all bookwork you're talking about. Our treasurer pays all the checks or all the bills, and She does it all on the computer on QuickBooks.
Okay, yep, that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Emily.
Lenora's treasurer does the books also.
Okay,
And prints a report for every meeting,
Okay,
a monthly
good.
report.
excellent.
This is Sally from Oberlin, and I'm a new member and I have no idea.
Well, hey, that's a question you can ask Sally at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, look at that. Excellent. All right. Now, with that, if the treasurer does not do the bookkeeping, then it's good for the treasurer to work with whoever does. We do have some libraries where the actual librarian does the bookkeeping. And so it's always good to have the treasurer involved in that in some way, whether they're checking out the reports before the meeting and making sure everything looks like it's good. Just to have a second eyes on the books to make sure there aren't any mistakes or issues. So, all right. And the treasurer does need to be bonded whether they are doing the books or not. So, okay, very good. All library boards should operate under the direction of bylaws. This will assure continuity and consistency in legal, policymaking, and financial activities. Bylaws should provide a structure through which the board operates. Now, I hope that all of you have seen a copy of the bylaws and your wonderful orientation packet that I'm sure you got, and with your sit down with your board chair and your librarian. So very good. I see nodding, so I'm guessing you did, but I can't see everybody.
Yes, we have bylaws.
Excellent. And it's important just to become acquainted with them and make sure you know how processes and procedures go for your board. Okay, now let's get into the meat of the board here. Statutory powers and duties of the library board. The power of the library board is in the group as a whole and not in individual board members, no matter the office they hold on the board. The library board constitutes a body corporate and politic under KSA 12-1223 and possesses the usual powers of a corporation for public purposes. The board may contract, sue, and be sued, acquire, hold, and convey real and personal property in accordance with the law. How does everybody feel about that statement? Because I usually get a reaction at this point from that statement.
I'm scared.
Because there's always that word sue, right? You know, and that definitely gets the hackles back on your neck going there. So, but luckily it's the board as a whole and not individual people. Okay, there are things in state law that protect individual board members. Okay, so concerning the library board, most of its powers are exercised independently of any control by the governing body of the parent municipality. The board treasurer is a custodian of all the library funds and has sole control over the expenditure thereof. That doesn't mean that the treasurer gets to choose what things get spent on. It just means that they're the ones who writes the checks. Notwithstanding this relative autonomy of the operation of the municipal service, i.e. the city or county library, and as such, it should be regarded as part of the parent municipality. So in looking at this, it's one of those difficult relationships, kind of like the librarian and the board itself. The library board is independent whenever it comes to making your plan, making your policies, deciding your budget that you need in order to fulfill that plan and your day-to-day operations, things like that. You are definitely independent, but there are some ways in which you are tied to that parent municipality, such as getting board members, appointment of board members. Whenever you're looking for a new spot to maybe build a new library, then you have to work through them to purchase the land and things like that. And so it's one of those relationships that you've got to make sure they understand and you understand different roles there. And sometimes it can cause some issues. I've seen that come up as well. So it's really one of those relationships that the board needs to continue to nurture. So let's get into the duties here. And this comes from state law, so it's quite interesting how they wrote these. If you notice anything interesting, you can jump in and point it out. To make and adopt rules and regulations of the administration of the library. So we're talking about policy. With the approval of the governing body of the municipality to purchase or lease a site or sites, and to lease or erect a building or buildings for the use of the library. To acquire by purchase, gift, or exchange books, magazines, papers, printed materials, slides, I like that one, pictures, films, projection equipment, phonograph records. Nothing about DVDs or CDs there. And other materials and equipment deemed necessary by the board for the maintenance and extension of modern library services. To employ a librarian and such other employees as are deemed necessary, and to set their salaries. To establish and maintain a library for libraries and traveling library service within the municipality or within any other municipality with which service contract arrangements have been made. So we're looking at a bookmobile would be something in that line. And then if, say, in Norton here, we had a bookmobile, but Decatur didn't, then Decatur might be able to work with Norton Public Library to have the bookmobile come there, things like that. So that's what they're talking about in that one. To contract with other legally established libraries or other governing body of the municipality not maintaining a library for the furnishing of library services to its inhabitants, and a contract with any school board to furnish library services to any school library, or to use the library facilities of the public school to supplement the facilities of the public library. So nothing that I think a lot of people would be doing at this point. To receive, accept, and administer any state and federal grants given for the purpose of aiding or providing library service. To receive and accept any gift or donation to the library and administer it according to any provision which may be specified. To make annual reports to the state librarian or the governing body of the municipality with statistical information for the preceding year, showing receipts, disbursements of all funds under its control, and information relating to the library materials acquired and on hand, number of library users, library services, and other information as may be required. Isn't this great? How many of you are ready to doze off? Yes.
Maybe a little.
Yeah, it's fine. You can admit it. I have no problem with that. And to place money received in the for library purposes from sources other than tax levy in a separate fund or funds, unless otherwise specified by the grantor or donor. So there you go. Lots of wonderful jargon and gibberish there to tell you what your job is. So why don't we boil this down? Let's make it a little simpler. How's that sound? So I'm going to start off by talking about then the big three. And basically everything above, most everything above there that I read to you fits into the big three in some way. And so that helps to boil it down and help you realize, okay, this is actually a lot simpler than that language makes it. So the big three are planning, budget, and policy. Planning is one of the most misunderstood and neglected processes in the library. You may notice I said it is a process and not a piece of paper to put on a shelf. Planning is a constant process that should be done at every board meeting. Is your plan on the library board agenda? Do you have time to hear reports or goals in your meetings or discuss possible changes? Do you discuss making additions to the plan? This is something that I am pushing our libraries to do, is to make that plan a part of their operation every time they have a meeting, and even staff meetings or anything like that, to discuss the plan and figure out how to keep moving that plan forward. Planning, in my opinion, isn't something that you do it. You work hard for a month getting all this information, put it together, and then great, we've got it, and we put it on a shelf, and then that's it, and we'll do it again next year. I really do believe that each time you have a board meeting, you should be talking about those goals that you have set for yourself. And so I have a catchy little saying here: without a plan, we do not know where we've been, where we are, or where we are going. After the development of a plan, we need to find a way to get the appropriate resources to achieve the goals set in the plan and for day-to-day operations of the library. And then finally, after that, we make sure that our library has appropriate policies in place to support and protect staff, patrons, and the library board. Okay, so let's talk about these just a little deeper, because I hate just doing this little glance over it. So I'd like to start off by saying, have any of you seen your library's plan? Okay, Emily, I see your hand. Sally, have you seen?
Not really.
Okay,
See that again.
let's see.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
We don't really, here at Norton Public, we don't really have a plan that we talk about. We just kind of do it as our, on our agenda, what the next step is going to be, what we'd like to do, what we'd like to see happen in the next few months, but we don't really have like an outlined plan that we go over and say, how are we coming on that or anything. We really don't. We probably should, but we don't at this point. With COVID and everything, it's all just kind of up in the air. So
I know, I completely understand. And actually, Pat, what you're saying there fits perfectly with what my way of planning is, because you don't necessarily have to have that big process at the beginning where you sit down for that month and go through it. You just have a quick conversation and talk about, what is the future of the library in our minds, here, the board, you, staff. You can even have a couple of your patrons that come in a lot. You can just say, hey, what do you need in the community? And you'll find out a lot of information. And then just take some of what you're doing already and take a few of those other ideas that you have float towards you. And right there, you've got a plan. And then you, just like you said, figure out what your next step is, talk about it at the board meeting. And then maybe you find, oh, this next step actually needs to be this instead of this, because we've discovered this issue. And then you just talk about that adjustment you're going to make in it and move it forward. I think we've all gotten in mind that it needs to be a huge, all-encompassing, nebulous thing, and it really doesn't. It kind of boils down to what you're talking about, Pat. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
I haven't seen the plan in Lenora yet, but we haven't had a board meeting since I've been on the board.
Okay, perfect. And don't feel bad if you don't have one. Please don't.
I forgot to give that to you, Melissa.
Because I'll tell you, most of the libraries don't. And so don't feel bad. I'm just offering the option here of having one because I think they're important. And I also offer the opportunity for myself to come out and help you develop one if you'd like. So please keep that in mind as well. And I actually put some of the questions up here on the screen. You can see there. Why do libraries exist? Why does your library exist? I like asking that question at the beginning because that really gets people thinking about the core values of the library. And what is the library of the future in your community? How are you going to get there? What resources will be needed to get there? Things like that. Okay. And one thing I want to make sure everybody understands too, this isn't just the librarian's job. I would hope that library board members get involved in helping to achieve these goals, whether it be through showing up at the library and volunteering for half an hour to do this project or taking on this piece of it. There are ways that library boards can assist in accomplishing these goals. Any questions or thoughts on that? Are there any of you that do planning professionally for business or anything like that, that maybe you think I'm off my rocker? Okay.
Plan's a good thing. No matter where you are, what you do, a plan is a good idea. And they're always up for adjustment, but it really gives you, instead of standing in the middle of a room wondering what you're going to do with it, at least when you sit down and discuss what you want to do with the room or whatever it is, you can start moving ahead. You find it doesn't work, you can go back and rewrite things. But I'm a firm believer in plans.
Okay. All right. So Gary and I are cut from the same fabric. Excellent. All right. Well, if it is something that you're interested in, if you get back and talk to your board members and you're like, oh yeah, we do need to write a plan, or if some of the librarians on tonight decide that that's something they'd like to do, please let me know and I can come and help out with it, or we can have a Zoom and talk about it, or whatever we need to do. Okay. Now for budgeting, budgets usually need to be presented to the city. And depending on your city situation, the city may have what's called a charter ordinance that will cap the amount of money that you can levy. Some cities don't have that, and so they are supposed to fund you at whatever level you ask for. But I also realize that there's reality in all this, that they also have other competing entities that need funds. And so I realize that you're not always going to get what you ask for, but if you don't know whether there's a charter ordinance or your board doesn't, I would definitely go to the city and ask them about that. Because it's always good to know what charter ordinances are in place for the library. I don't know if a lot of you know what that even means, and if you'd like me to explain it, I can, but it gets into deep stuff that gets crazy. Honestly, it has to do with the state legislature and application of law and so on and so forth. But you can ask, and they'll definitely have those on the books. And the last, of course, is policy, and policy is a big one. And I want to say with all three of these, planning, budget, and policy, they're all big. That's why I call them the big three. But you definitely need to have your library director, librarian, whatever the title is in your library, involved in the process in every one of these. Because your library director is going to have a lot of good input on the plan. They're going to have a lot of good input on budget, especially if there's some of the ones that do the bookkeeping. And they definitely will have a lot of good input on policy because they're in the trenches. They're applying that policy every day. And they also see where there are gaps in the policy that maybe something else needs to be included. And so please include them in that process. And also make sure that every board member gets a chance to be a part of it as well. Okay. Any questions? And so I have on this slide here the different policies that the library can have. Every library should have a personnel policy. And then after that, it all depends on your library. It's definitely a locality thing. But some of the ones that we recommend are service policy. Definitely should have a collection development policy, an emergency preparedness or disaster policy, board policy, and then the Kansas SIPA is required by state law to have that in place as well.
Hey, George?
Yes.
It's Harold.
Yes.
Is the personnel policy important to have if there's only one employee?
It really is, yes. Because in that personnel policy, it's going to talk about discipline. It's going to talk about hiring, firing, the whole process for that. It's going to also have in there any benefits that you get or wages or anything like that. So it really is important because what it does is it spells out the board's the board's expectations for the employee, and also then the employee has those expectations so they know what's expected of them. And so if you don't have one, Harold, I can help you with that.
Well, no, okay, thank you.
Mhm. You
I've
betcha.
got a wife that's very good at policies, so.
Oh, well, then
I'm
have
sure
her,
we'll
have
come up
Kathy
with
do it.
some.
That's good. That's awesome. Okay, and now at this point, I kind of want to show you how interesting it is that these things definitely do feed back to those things that I read you, those wonderful bedtime reading statements that I read there. So when it comes to the rules and regulations, that's the policy right here. When it talks about gifts and in purchasing of books and magazines and things like that, that falls into the collection development policy. When you employ employees and a library director, that's your personnel policy, and we'll get into that too. That's another monster in and of itself. Anytime that you are going to contract with another municipality or another organization, you probably should have some sort of policy that goes along with that. When you receive funds, that goes into your budget. Any gifts and donations, that goes straight into your budget. And so a lot of those items that we talked about fit into these three categories. And so that's how we really try to simplify it and make it a lot easier on all of you to understand it. Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Okay, all right. So now I'll move on to the next one. This isn't part of the big three because I figure it needs to be an item all to itself, and that is the library director, librarian. And most of the times when I talk about this, I talk about that relationship between the board and the librarian. And so before I kind of get started in talking about this, there's an important point that I like to make. The relationship between the board and the director is one of those relationships that needs constant attention, and you constantly balance that. And to do so, I think, and I found that the easiest way is to make sure that the duties of the library board and the director are precisely delineated and followed. And I mean precisely. In my 12 years at the system here, I've seen relationships between the board and the director that have been so challenging and almost destructive to the library. I've seen boards that micromanage, that have driven directors nuts. I've seen boards that don't attend meetings. You barely get a quorum once every 4 or 5 months. I've seen some boards that are just downright antagonistic towards everybody, it seems like. Now, to turn that around, likewise, I've also seen directors who steal, who think that they need to do it all, that need to be in total control, and so they kind of take away from the board. And I've seen some librarians that fight every decision the board tries to make. And in all those situations, I've seen communication and that duty delineation being some of the key factors in maintaining that relationship. And it's unfortunate when that happens, this breakdown, because really the people that suffer the most are the community, the patrons, the staff, other than the director, and the library itself. I mean, just walking into it, you can tell that there's an environment of hostility, and you see that there aren't as many patrons coming to the library because they sense it as well. And so it's really important for both sides to nurture and develop that relationship. And if there's one thing that you get from this evening, I hope it's that you as a board member will do all that you can to help build that relationship and develop that relationship. So the library board has the power to hire, fire, and I like to say this, nurture, and discipline the director. The board should hire someone that's competent and capable of running the library based on the job description that you have in place. To nurture, fire, and discipline, I think requires good communication. I think that if the board members can give good feedback to library directors as often as you can at meetings, I think you'll just see that that's going to benefit everyone. But it has to be constructive, because just coming in and saying you're a terrible person, or that book was 3 inches forward while the rest of the books were back farther on the shelf, that makes you're horrible or whatever. I'm making up silly statements here just to show you that it's got to be constructive, and it's got to be something that the library director can grow from and the board can grow from as well. And I tell you, one of the tools that I think helps the most in that communication is having that annual board evaluation of the director, because that's an opportunity for you to show them what the positive things that you've seen throughout the year, and then to share with them some things that you think can change, and do it in a way that it's not personal, because it should never be that way. We all make mistakes. We're all human. It should be in a way that is meant to improve the library. And likewise, I hope library directors will be in a place where they don't take it personally and realize that this is meant to be a positive exchange in order to help the library become the best that it possibly can. And just talking about that right there, I know has piqued the uncomfortable part of all of us, because those discussions we know tend to sometimes devolve and break down and hurt feelings and things like that. And that's why I say at the beginning, it's so important to nurture that relationship so that the director knows that you're coming from a place that is meant to improve and not to rebuke or hurt. The delineation of duties to help with that whole process, I think it's important to go back to and I hate to say it, but to go back to those duties we talked about before. If you notice, a lot of those things are policy things. And so if there is a duty that it turns into a policy situation, such as selecting books and ordering books and getting books to the library, then that ends up being a delegated duty that you give to the library director to perform. And so that policy then allows you to have control over that process by saying, we're only going to collect these kind of books. We're only going to buy DVDs because not all people own Blu-rays, disc players, or we want to make sure that our fiction collection is the focus. And so we want to make sure you're ordering fiction titles more than nonfiction, or whatever it might be. But that is the way for the library board to set expectations for the director to achieve those things. And right there, then you have the delineation of those duties. So if a board member comes in and says, you don't order enough nonfiction, that's just terrible. They really can't make that statement, because you've already set the collection development policy. That's not your job as a library board member now, it's the library director's job. And if this is a discussion we want to have, then we need to have that in a meeting as a whole. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? And so there are delegated responsibilities that come along with it. And so some of those that I have here, I'd like to share with you. And one of those actually is the collection development policies. And so I have, through the collection development policy, the board delegates the responsibility of selecting materials for inclusion in a library collection. Through the personnel policy, the board is delegating the responsibility of hiring, firing, and disciplining other staff members, if you have more than yourself. Harold, I'd hate to see you have to discipline yourself. So, yeah.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah, I bet it would be.
I'm such a good guy.
That's right. We all love you, and I'm sure you love yourself, so I'd hate to see that happen. Through the service policy, the board is delegating the day-to-day operations of the library to the library director. So some of the other items that usually get delegated in libraries are, of course, the tracking of statistics and reporting those statistics to the state library, as well as we talked about before, financial tracking and bill payment. So it's important that everybody on the board realizes that the power of the board is in the whole, not in any individual, and that through policy, you are delegating certain duties to the librarian or the library director. And that if there needs to be a change, that it can happen, but it needs to happen through a discussion of the library board with the librarian. So any questions about that? Okay. To go along with that, again, if you don't have a job description, let me know. I can help you write those. I have samples. Really, any of this, if you don't have, which I think most of you do have these in place anyway, I can definitely help with, or if it's time to update them, you know, we recommend that policies and be looked at least annually. Along with that, then your job descriptions and other things, just to make sure everything's still on the up and up. And I know one thing that can kind of get away from us is that human resource element of things, the laws that go along with that. So if you need any assistance with that as well, we can help you out. Because I know sometimes, even with the new COVID human resource rules and regulations, it definitely got confusing for a lot of people there for a while.
George, this is Pat at Norton Public. That's something we talked about, that we're probably going to have to put a pandemic thing in our policies about the director's duties and, you know, how she can handle them without board approval, that kind of thing. That's something we're going to have to look into too.
That's right. Those emergency powers to take care of the business. Absolutely. Okay, and man, I'm doing good because this is about where I wanted to be here. So now I'd like to open it up for questions. Like I said, this was just meant to be an overview of the library board, and then a little bit into the relationship there with the librarian. But I definitely would take any kind of questions you might have. It doesn't even have to involve what we talked about tonight. If you have some other questions that maybe something came up during a board meeting that you didn't understand, I'd love to help out with that if I can. Hey, Kathy, you need to tell those 2 board members that you deserve a raise. I'd say 25%, right? So 25% of 0 is, oh man, it's still 0. Yeah.
I have a question about, you were talking about the mayor. I know that he's a member of the board,
Yes.
but I did not realize that he should be a voting member, which of course he has to be there to vote, I'm assuming. Because of that, we have to have 5 there to be a quorum.
Correct.
Which means that if we don't have 5 there, we cannot vote.
That's correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was clear on that.
Yep. Nope. You absolutely are. And unfortunately, the mayor can't appoint anybody to be an alternate for him either. It has to be him and him alone, him or her alone. Sorry. Look at me. I'm being a sexist now. I'm sorry. Okay. Thank you for that question. Anybody else?
Can you tell us, George, what you'll be going over at the next meeting tomorrow night? Will it be similar, or will it be?
No, I'm going to basically cover. I'm going to cover meetings and how to have effective board meetings. And then from there, I'm going to move into trustee orientation and how boards can set up a trustee orientation that helps new members coming in. And so they will definitely be different topics. And then next week on Tuesday, I will have one more session, and it's just going to be an open question and answer session. So I'm just basically going to be on sitting here, and if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, they can come on and ask it.
Will you, these will all be recorded and we'll be able to go back and watch them on your NWKLS website?
That's
All of
correct.
them, even like the questions and answers and everything?
Yes,
Awesome.
that is correct.
If we're not able to attend. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Plus, I have a few documents that I'll be putting up with these. I have some resources for new trustees for looking at, say you want to go out and look at the library budget itself as part of the city budget. I have some resources for that and other things that that will help you in your job. So.
Do you know approximately how long tomorrow night's meeting is going to be?
It'll probably be about the same as this.
Okay. I was wanting to know because we actually have a regular board meeting tomorrow night at 5:30, but then we was going to jump on this since they would be there and then finish up our meeting afterwards.
Okay, yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be about 50 minutes or so.
Okay.
I don't want to make them too long because then you really get tired and bored and fall asleep. And hopefully I won't have any more law that I'll be reading to you. So.
Sounds good.
Any other questions? Well, it's a pleasure to meet and see all of you over video. And hopefully someday I'll actually get to come out and meet you in person and see you in person. Those of you that I do know. And again, I can't express enough the gratitude that I personally and all of us here in Northwest Kansas have for all of you and serving as trustees. Because you are that, I call it 1/3 of the piece of the pie. The librarian and staff is another third, and then the city's the other third. I mean, without you, there would be no library. And so I'm grateful for all of you being willing to step forward and to be a trustee. So thank you.
Well, I thank you for your time.
Thanks, George. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George. Bye.
Okay, we're out of here.
Thank you.